Okay, so we are at about 500 participants. So we'll begin today's webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to today's webinar on tourism insights and strategy to the COVID-19 crisis. Organized by the Pacific Asia Travel Association in partnership with the Thailand Convention and Exhibition Bureau. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Paul Brangan. I'm the Director of Communications and External Affairs at PATA. I will be your host for today, and I will also moderate the last session regarding strategy to the COVID-19 crisis. Before we get to our opening remarks, I just wanted to go through a couple of housekeeping notes for everybody. So please do pay attention. First, most importantly, we have there's a chat function, as you can see at the bottom of your screen. Please use the chat function to engage with other participants. Say hello, introduce yourself. If you recognize a fellow participant, say hello, reach out. But however, do not submit questions to speakers using this function. If you would like to submit any questions to the speakers and panelists, please use the Q&A function below, as you can see. I just want to give another tip for everyone today. There is an option, if you click on the screen on the speaker here, you'll see 3 dots. You can just view the picture of those only with their videos on, so it'll make your viewing pleasure more enjoyable. So let's quickly go to the agenda for today. So we'll begin with opening remarks from PATA, followed by welcome remarks by TCEB. Then we will hear from the Economist Corporate Network presenting on COVID-19 impact on regional economies and jobs. That'll be followed by Forward Key's presentation on COVID-19 impact on air bookings into APAC. Then that will be followed by presentation from Adara regarding travel-related consumer behavior and key trends during COVID-19. Our speakers will come back for a Insights panel session moderated by PATA, and that will then be followed by the final panel discussion, moving beyond crisis management strategies for recovery with 2031 and MMGY Global, which will be moderated by myself. So as I said, please do submit your questions to our speakers and panelists using the Q&A function and not the chat function. There's no need to raise your hand, just use the Q&A function. We'll then close out with some closing remarks from PATA, and I'll just do a quick wrap up for you today. Just want to let everyone know, presentations and webinar recording will be made available next week. Actually, not all of them. There's a couple there's one that won't be available, but the rest will be available, and we will be happy to send it to you. So now we've come to our beginning of the webinar, our opening remarks. So with that, I would like now to pass the mic over to Dr. Mario Hardy, the Chief Executive Officer at the Pacific Asia Travel Association. Mario, please turn on your camera and your microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. You want to turn your video on as well?
It should be on.
There it is. Oh, nope. There you go.
Thank you, Paul. Just give me 1 second. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, afternoon, good evening for wherever you are around the world. Very happy for all of you to having joined us today. Again, thanks for joining today's webinar, Tourism Insights and Strategies to the COVID-19 Crisis. I hope each one of you are staying safe and healthy during this current situation. As the CEO of PATA, I want to first thank all of you for the support to actually speak to all of you today. But at the same time, I also like to thank Thailand Convention and Exhibition Bureau, TCEB, for partnering with us to organize today's webinar. The COVID-19 pandemic presents a severe threat to the world economy and in particular to the global travel and tourism industry. According to research from the World Travel and Tourism Council, WTTC, travel and tourism GDP loss to the world's economy is up to $2.7 trillion, while up to 100 million jobs are at immediate risk globally, with the Asia-Pacific region expected to be the most heavily impacted, with 63.4 million jobs at risk throughout the entire region. This represents a loss of nearly $1 billion for the travel and tourism GDP for this region particularly. As the industry faces one of the greatest threats it has ever seen, now more than ever, we need to work together to build a more resilient, responsible, sustainable, and a stronger travel and tourism industry. This is not the time for competition between individuals or organizations, but a time for coordinated cooperations between all industry stakeholders from both the public and private sectors. Today's webinar in partnership with TCEB is just a small example of how we as an industry should be working together so that we can look at rebuilding travel and tourism for a better future. During times such as these, it is essential to have trusted and reliable analysis and insight, and most up-to-date data and information in order to enact a measured and balanced recovery strategy. This is something we at PATA have been consistently promoting since the beginning of the outbreak, and the reasons why we have organized today's webinar. It is also the reason why we created the PATA Crisis Resource Center and the Tourism Recovery Monitor. And I urge you to please do visit the website to obtain reliable, up-to-date policy statements, authoritative information, and tourism indicators from around the globe. There you can find government resources that may be available for your destinations. You will also find a link to our PATA Business Impact Survey. Your responses help us better understand how the current pandemic is impacting your organization and provide us with the information we require to work with policymakers and other stakeholders on your behalf towards an appropriate response. This difficult time is tough for many of us across the sector, so I encourage you to take this time to reach out to your fellow PATA members and industry colleagues for assurance and support. As a membership association, we must remember our strength lies in the extensive network of our members and the close-knit community that we have built over many, many years. This is what makes PATA special and is the foundation of our Vision 2020 Partnership for Tomorrow. In the meantime, we all must continue to do our part and protect the health of our families, employees, and the public. PATA will continue to stand by our members and industry colleagues during this time such as these, and I hope that all of you will stand with us. Once again, a thank you very much to TCEB for helping us to organize today's webinar. Thank you to all of you and to our speakers for spending the time with us this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mario. So, thank you, Mario, for those kind words. Now, I'd like to invite, Kun Jaruwan Suwanasit, or otherwise known as Kun Rose, the Director of MICE Intelligence and Innovation Department at the Thailand Convention Exhibition Bureau, for her welcome remarks.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. So a very good afternoon to everyone. And thank you, Pata, for your kind introduction. So allow me to share some decoration a little bit. Okay. So once again, thank you, Pata, for this. As close allies, Pata and TCEB always works hand in hand to energize the visitor economy community as a whole since the inception of TCEB. Now, the future of our industry is at the gruesome turning point. I believe everyone agrees that this is the most challenging chapter in the history of tourism and business events. But no matter how tough the future will be, on the bright side, we still have each other's company. We can plow it through, not sweatless, of course, but without resilience and optimism, we will get through this together. At talks like this, we come together and discuss the way to get through this crisis. We may think of how to get things back to normal just like before, but let's face the harsh truth. The world as we know it before COVID-19 has gone for good. We should not come together to find ways to push things back to where they were, but instead find new ways to do business in the uncharted landscape, which is about to unfold before us. The world might look familiar, but in the same time, everything has changed, including our mindset of doing business and the client's perspectives toward travel, meetings, gathering, networking. Basically, all activities those require human-to-human contact. And those activities are at the core value of our industries. That means we have to work harder, think harder to make sure that we have all we need to thrive in this brave new world. The question right now is not the dilemma of should we risk relapsingly by reopening the business, or should we keep the economy closed like this to stay safe? But we should search for most suitable and feasible way to do business during this crisis, and also seeking the way to win the market when people can travel again safely. This unusual scenario forced the event organizers to reconsider their option and to balance two urgencies. On one hand, the health and safety of staff, sponsors, and attendees, and on the other hand, the necessity to achieve financial goals, or at the very least to minimize the losses caused by this turbulence. Virtual events seems like the only sensible way out. However, even the concept is not new. Not so many of us can say that they are familiar with the practice. Virtual events call for unique expertise among event professionals to ensure the success of these events. That's another challenge to consider. To help enterprises tide over the COVID-19 pandemic, TCEB has been launching a series of digital initiatives, including webinar and virtual exhibition or O2O. The packages combine online and offline promotion so that the exhibitors can showcase product at the show or remotely from live streaming. You get the best of two worlds at once. O2O can ease up the pain of decreased amount of trade visitors due to air travel complication. The move towards virtual event represents a sizable challenge for many event planners. New functions and roles are emerging to tackle this critical shift in the event industries. Even if the situation turns normal, virtual event will solidify the importance of online engagement as a feature of all events, and many of the new roles will persist in one form or another, even after lockdown and travel restrictions. Some of the most used words of the past 2 months include unprecedented, uncharted waters, and the new normal. The latter is the one we need to focus on to keep things going. As I said earlier, the scene right now seems so grim and discouraging, but at least our solidarity and collaboration will get us through. Let's all trust in our industry. There will be nothing as strong as the sense of community. Being part of something that meaningful, being together. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, we will thrive together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kun Rose, for those beautiful words.
I'm so sorry that I felt so much of this.
This is an emotional time. So
I do apologize.
Yeah. Thank you. Khap kun kha.
Khap kun kha. Thank you, Kha.
Thank you again to TCEB, and thank you again to everyone on your staff for helping out organize today's webinar. So, tough to always follow up after emotional speeches, but with that, we come to our first presentation of the day, COVID-19 impact on regional economies and jobs. And with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker is Pamela Chu, the Director of Southeast Asia from the Economist Corporate Network. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Pamela.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that introduction. And hi, everyone. I'm very glad to be here. I have prepared a presentation, which I hope that should come up into your screen shortly. And what I'd like to share with you today is the Economist's view on how the 2020 growth outlook looks like, and also what that recovery might look like. It's a very uncertain outlook at the moment, and there are various scenarios that we are watching. I'll share with you our baseline scenario, as well as talk through what that might mean on the impact for jobs and security of employment in Asia. So just looking at some themes for the year, the coronavirus really captures most of that headline, and it's no surprise that in the first half of the year of 2020, growth rates will be terrible. We are expecting that 18 of the G20 will be in recession. The only two exceptions at the moment in our model is China and Indonesia, but we are very worried about the second round effects of unemployment and possibly unrest, especially in an area such as Asia, where many people are employed in manufacturing, trade, tourism, for all of you here, as well as the informal workforce of having to be out in the streets in order to earn a living. And those government shutdowns are not allowing them to do that. And this is really depriving their rice bowl, which can create a lot of anger. And so that, and anger, fear, and anxiety. And I think that that sort of environment can be very dangerous as under stress situation, we could be looking at political and social upheaval as well. On the second theme of growth, I think what I'd like to just share here, I have a number of points, but I just highlight one or two in each channel, is around policy responses. And if you recall, in 2019, the global economy was already slowing, and there was a lot of action on the central banks to try to revive growth. Central banks from the US all the way to Asia were cutting interest rates, actually with not very much success. And at that time, the economists in the EIU were already quite aggressively pushing the idea that fiscal policy needs to step in more aggressively. That didn't happen. It has happened now, but our question is it too late? And is it going to be effective? Because that is, well, but if you get a tax cut, that's not really going to inspire you to spend more. It's only going to allow you to not pay your rent. On the third theme of what the new world will look like, you know, we heard from the previous speakers, this is one of the themes to focus our priorities on and our attention on. We are looking at three things. First is the rollback of globalization. It was already a theme that was happening, very keenly felt here in Asia in the context of the US-China trade war. But it's also true that with the coronavirus, that sort of sentiment is going to grow deeper to retract into your own countries. And that had a political agenda to it, but at the moment with this crisis, there's also an economic argument to why you might want to focus in on local industry. If you're a country that is recovering, for example, China, it doesn't make sense for policymakers to be stimulating export-oriented industries because global demand for their goods is very weak. What will be more helpful for China is to focus on local industry so that that capture of multiplier can be in the country, as opposed to letting it leak out to export markets that might not even have the appetite to buy those products. So there is an economic argument for some of this nationalistic instinct. This is not necessarily good. I mean, the arguments might be there, but doesn't mean that we're in a good place. Certainly something to watch. I guess what is positive for Asia is that if anywhere in the world is going to grow this year, as I pointed out, it's in Asia, led a little bit by China. We were the first to get hit, most likely the first to recover. And that means that this part of the world can tap into its own domestic supply chains and domestic demand in order to grow and capture that potential. The second theme that we're looking at is acceleration of tech, and I'll share a bit more later, as well as the consolidation of business, where as big firms get bailed out by governments because they're considered too big to fail and they employ a lot of people, they could potentially become monopolistic. And it's also the case that many of the big firms, some of them are in the position to buy up smaller companies, and it's really the SMEs that are suffering. And that is something for us to really seriously think about and for policymakers to be aware of. I'll just share some headline figures around COVID. I know many of you are very familiar with this, but just to recap, this is the latest figures we have on the number of deaths across countries since the 50th death on a log scale. What I'd like to point out is the US. It is a source of worry for us that rates are not really coming down in the US. And if you talk to some international experts, they strongly believe that the death toll in the US will reach something like 200,000. And that is scary because at this current time, with 60,000 deaths in the US, there is already a lot of economic panic and also the fear of not being able to jumpstart the economies again. If the death toll continues to rise, politicians will struggle, mayors will struggle to open up those economies in any large way. You can expect that social distancing will remain the landscape for a number of months to come in the US. Just to address some concerns around reporting on COVID, it's an important thing to bear in mind that first, the measurement of COVID is not synchronized across the world. So what China might consider as a COVID case might not necessarily be the same as another country. And this is confusing reporting around COVID. But not just only that, if you look at countries that I've listed here, let's start with England and Wales. In the time period of March 14th to April 17th, the governments have officially announced 19,000 COVID deaths. But if you look at the number of deaths that has happened in this period compared to previous years past, actually that number is 27,000, which suggests that there are a number of excess deaths that's happening above trend rate that are not currently attributed to COVID-19. Whether or not this is because they were not tested before the deaths happened, or whether or not it's related to something not about COVID, such as I know there's reports showing in New York City, there have been a lot more heart attacks happening in the month of March than in any other month in previous years, because as you can imagine, it's very stressful to be in New York City in March, and also people are worried about jobs and the economic situation is dire. So it's quite clear that COVID is having an impact not just in the official line, but along on public health that is perhaps underreported, or also it's creating tension in other areas affecting health of people. Now you come down to Asia, very interesting and important statistic to look at in Jakarta. I must say, we're not trying to pinpoint Jakarta, but Jakarta at least is a place where we could get some information about excess deaths. We couldn't get that in some other emerging markets. But if you look at this as an example of what's happening in Indonesia, if you read the graph again, in the month of March, 84 official COVID deaths announced by the government. But if you track the number of burials that are happening in parks in Jakarta, that number of excess deaths compared to previous years past is 1,500, which means that the 84 official number of COVID deaths is really a very small proportion of the abnormality in death rate at this point in time. So it's important to bear in mind that sometimes the situation of COVID is possibly a lot worse than we expect, and or we have been led to believe, and that is why governments are very forced to have to shut down their economies. Coming on to our growth rates, I'm going to share with you our macroeconomic growth rates by region. But before I do that, I really need to explain some of the assumptions that we are making. If you read the newspapers, there will be a wide variation of how forecasters are predicting the global economy and individual economies to end up. And usually that is because we are taking different assumptions for when the virus might end and how the recovery might look like. So for us, what we believe is that the virus, from a health perspective, has gotten under control in China already, and that means that the country is ready to start again and to relieve restrictions and for productivity to come back to normal. We're expecting that kind of scenario to surface in the EU and the US by the end of June, and where other markets where healthcare systems are not quite as strong and there's not enough testing and treatment, then we expect that to happen only at the end of September. This is the baseline scenario that we're working with. In this kind of scenario, we're expecting tourism, retail, hospitality, commodities to be extremely weak this year, with very little hope of rebounding until maybe the end of next year. I think it's important to have an eye out on the pessimistic scenario where we do not get the virus under control, and what you're really waiting for is a vaccine. And in this case, growth rates come down quite substantially across the world. This is just going to be a quick look at our growth rates. In China, we're expecting 1%, India flat, ASEAN -2. I just quickly highlight that if you look at our growth rates, of course, is nowhere near the high ones that we've experienced in many decades. But at the same time, if we compare ourselves to other parts of the world, it does look a little bit better, or at least not quite as bad. Everyone's watching how China's returning to work, and that story so far has been somewhat positive, giving people hope of a V-shaped recovery. There is some evidence to show that is the case. For example, if you look at the congestion index I've shown you here, journey times are roughly back to normal compared to previous years past when you compare that against the length of Chinese New Year passing. But if you look at the chart on the below, you see, as you would already know yourselves, international travel or travel across country or large countries across provinces is certainly not back to normal. What we're showing there is about 30% compared to other years past. We're looking at PMI in the middle, and it is quite clear that China has got that V-shaped recovery, but we will add a strong word of caution here that these are expectations of manufacturing purchasing managers to say that they are ready to start purchasing those items again to get their factories up and running. And that is because China, by mid-March, had most of the factory workers in place and they were ready to run. However, global demand for their goods is very weak, and so it's unclear whether this sort of activity levels can be really back to normal. A quick snapshot of where we are in ASEAN. Thailand sort of not suffering the worst at the moment because of the dependence on tourism, trade, and manufacturing. Quite a similar picture in Singapore, but Singapore has also come in very, very strongly with fiscal packages. And then you can see at the top there, Vietnam, who had been performing best in Asia for the last 2 or 3 years, continues to sort of be that outperformer, if you could call it that, being tied into China and also having managed the coronavirus crisis relatively well, and they are ready to go again. Just a quick word on jobs. I heard earlier in the presentation by Mario around the number of people employed in the tourism sector, about 10%. I think you can match that against the rest of the other industries through this chart. What you're seeing is the ILO's figures on the estimated impact of COVID on these sectors. And we have colored them in red if the impact is high. And then we've also charted the length of the bar of that sector according to how much they employ in the global workforce. So for example, trade and manufacturing cover about, or employ about 30% of the global workforce. And tourism takes the bar right next to it, about 10% of the global workforce that is very highly impacted by COVID. And this is what really is concerning, because it is manufacturing, tourism, trade that we find will be very difficult to have that V-shaped recovery. And this means that we might be possibly in for some sort of jobless situation for some time to come. Just the last theme, last 2 themes around tech, as well as and consolidation of power in different sectors. What you're looking at on the chart on the left is the global stock market performance by sector. If you focus first in on the gray bars, that is the median of each sector, and you can see by and large, all sectors, the median companies have really not been doing well. It's no surprise there. I think what is interesting is the top quartile of each sector in healthcare, tech, and consumer staples have actually managed to edge ahead in terms of their stock market valuations today compared to January 1st. If you think about technology, just today, Microsoft announced 15% growth in earnings in Q1, very much the same rate as previous quarters, which suggests their business is still doing well because of demand for cloud services and all of the other things that they produce. But you can see that in consumer staples too, you can find these sorts of winners where people have been buying groceries as well as toilet paper and sanitary wipes and so on that have helped keep demand up despite unemployment rising. Same with healthcare. I think there are 2 things going on here. First, some healthcare companies obviously working very hard on a pandemic, and investors are liking that. It's also they've been able to sell medical equipment as well as surgical equipment to help us deal with the crisis. And at the same time, there's a broad consensus that post-COVID, or whenever that happens, there will be definitely a lot more focus on healthcare spending than in the past. And if you look at the chart on the right, this is just an elaboration on the tech angle, which show that the tech valuations have really been going up, especially after the advent of 4G. And the question is, at the advent of 5G, how is that valuation going to expand? I have a lot more to share, but I'm conscious that I'm a little bit over time, so I'm going to pause here and hand back over to Paul.
Thank you much, Pamela. But we'll see you again, Pamela, at the panel discussion a little bit later. So if you can just stop sharing your screen. Okay, thank you. And we'll see Pamela again in just a few minutes. But first, we get to our next presentation. So I know I'd speak louder, so I'll speak a bit louder. We come to our next presentation on COVID-19 impact on air bookings into APAC. And with us, we are happy to welcome Mr. Olivier Ponty. He's the Vice President of Insights at Forward Keys. So Olivier, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Hi, everybody. Let me share my screen with you. All right. So, hi once more. Thank you to PATA for inviting us once more to this to a PATA webinar. Thank you to all the people attending this this session. My name is Olivier Ponty. I'm VP for Insights at Forward Keys, and let me say a few words about Forward Keys and the kind of data that we use before showing you some key findings about the impact of COVID-19 on air travel to the Asia Pacific. We're a B2B travel analytics company. We're experts in air travel, and what we do is use different data sets to monitor the successive steps of the traveler's journey. From the moment that people search for a flight at the very early stage of their travel, and to the moment that they book their travel, to the moment that airlines issue tickets for this travel. We can also see how much seating capacity airlines put on the market, and we combine all this information to anticipate future travel trends. What we have at our disposal is the most complete data set on direct and indirect air bookings in the world. So what do these data tell us about the impact of COVID-19? Let's first have a look at the year-to-date situation as of the 27th of April, and I'd like to put the results for the Asia Pacific in a broader context. As you can see here, international arrivals worldwide year-to-date have decreased by more than 50%. The Asia Pacific is the worst hit region, minus 60%, followed by Europe, about minus 54%, and Africa and the Middle East and the Americas are all around minus 47%. What we can clearly see here are the different steps, the different waves of the pandemic, starting in Asia Pacific, expanding to Europe, and then to the rest of the world. Let's now focus on the Asia Pacific, because what we can see here are very contrasted results. Northeast Asia is the most severely hit, dragged down by China, minus 73% in international arrivals. And then the other parts of this world region, whether it's South and Southeastern Asia or the Oceania, are more or less within the same range. That's minus 40 to minus 50%. Let's change gears now and look not at arrivals, but bookings made for a future trip to the Asia Pacific region, international bookings. And it doesn't matter when exactly that trip will take place. What we're trying to monitor here with this indicator is the willingness to travel by world region. And here, once more, we see a pretty clear pattern. From the moment China introduced travel restrictions, that's really the start of the COVID-19 crisis for the tourism industry. We can see a direct impact on bookings from the Asia Pacific region, very quickly reaching this minus 100% line, which is in fact the moment when there are more cancellations than bookings. So in this first wave, the Asia Pacific, and very quickly afterward, the Americas here in purple, reached that moment when there are more cancellations than bookings, and it hasn't really recovered since then. In this first stage of the epidemics, of the pandemic, Europe and Africa and the Middle East were still doing significantly better than the rest. Negative results, but they were still holding. From the moment we reached the second phase of the pandemic, with COVID-19 hitting Italy, Lombardy, we can see that the bookings made by whether it's Europe or Africa and the Middle East also collapse. And it's been now since the end of February that there are more bookings than cancellations for pretty much all parts of the world, which leads us to this incredible total figure here of minus 100%, meaning that over this whole period there has been more cancellations than bookings being made for trips for future trips. So quite quite out of the ordinary. Now let's leave for a minute the realm of international bookings, and let's focus on domestic travel. And I'd like to focus here on domestic travel within China, because as Pamela has just showed, everyone is watching at China and its recovery. Now, what we can see here, looking at domestic air arrivals in China, is encouraging, but I would say this leads us to cautious optimism. We can clearly see here the impact of Chinese New Year, which led to a peak in arrivals, the negative impact of the COVID crisis expanding. But then here, and this is where that is interesting, we can see the improvement of the Chinese economy, so basically China slowly going back to work, having an impact on domestic travel to the within the destination. That's what we can see here at the end of February, beginning of March, and then since then, we see a very, very sluggish recovery. It's almost stable, but still it's going up little by little. Now that some of the key regions within China are easing travel restrictions, it will be interesting to see in the coming weeks how this curve evolves. Now, both leisure and corporate travel within China are slowly recovering, but we can clearly see here that the destinations leading the way are the commercial centers, like Shenzhen here in blue. Leisure destinations like Hainan are still recovering as well, very, very slowly, but they're lagging behind the big commercial centers. So definitely something to keep monitoring in the coming weeks. Now, let's have a look now at the supply side of things. We've had a look at demand until now, but supply is important. It is important because, as we can see on this map, most destinations within the area are still not open for business. There's a large number of travel restrictions in place, and it is clear that no recovery can take place in terms of international travel as long as those travel restrictions are in place. So the timing of the lifting of these travel restrictions will be key, and whether those travel restrictions will be lifted in a coordinated way or in a disorganized way will probably also play a role in the speed of recovery within the region. Still looking at the supply side, airlines, well, air capacity in the past weeks has just been a fraction of what it used to be. This is the picture worldwide. The picture for Asia looks very, very similar. We know that at the moment we have less than 10% of the air capacities that we used to have just a year ago still flying. This is a concern because at this stage it's very difficult to know which airline will be still left standing when we get across this crisis. And what that basically means is that connectivity to all destinations within the region will have very, very significantly changed when this crisis ends, and the competitive landscape will be very different as well. Let's have a look at the summer now. It will be a critical summer for many tourism businesses because the situation is very dire and everyone is hungry for visitors. Unfortunately, the summer outlook doesn't look great for the region. All destinations are very, very much behind in terms of bookings. Northeast Asia, once more, is the most behind, minus 75%, but the other regions are all strongly lagging behind in a similar range, around minus 65%, between minus 60 and 65%. So very negative outlook across the board. The situation, the picture so far is quite negative, I agree, but there's another way of looking at it. Here, what we can see on this chart is the booking pattern for trips to international trips to Asian destinations to take place in either June, July, or August, so the summer. What we can see here is that most of the bookings for this period are due to take place between May and July. What this means is that it's still not too late to salvage the summer. In a very, very optimistic scenario, if things get quickly under control, it would be still possible, betting on delayed bookings and regular booking patterns, to still salvage part of the summer. But I confess this is a very, very optimistic scenario. What should bring some optimism to this presentation is the fact that when looking at search patterns from key source markets, we see that in spite of the fact that many people are quarantined or asked to stay at home, they're still thinking about travel. And yes, they're adapting their searches. They're searching more for trips to happen in Q3 or Q4. Here we have the example with searches performed from South Korea. But the important thing is that they're still thinking about a future trip. Most of the time, they're thinking about a trip within the Asia-Pacific regions for people searching from this region. But more often than in the past, they're also looking for long-haul destinations. They're not booking, but they're still dreaming about their future holidays. And why not dream big if you're not booking anyways? So we're seeing a surge in bookings for trips to North America, whether it's the US or Canada, to France as well. But within the region, lots of searches for trips to Japan or the Philippines, for example, in the case of South Korea. So I guess this is food for thought for marketeers within the travel industry. Once more, even if people are not booking, they're still thinking about their next trip, and that's, I think that as long as the willingness to travel is not dead, there is still hope for our sector. I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, and now back to you, Paul.
Thank you much, Olivier. Always a pleasure hearing from you. A very insightful presentation. We have a poll I'd like to share. Actually addresses one of the questions I see in the Q&A. Someone asked if people are really interested to travel after the crisis is over. So here's the quick poll. Would you travel internationally this year? This is a personal choice of yours. Would you like to travel would you travel internationally this year? If the crisis is over, will you hesitate? So please do answer that. We will come back and post the results after the next presentation. So if you haven't done a quick poll, please do it now, and we'll look at the results after the next presentation. So now we come to our next presentation. It's travel-related consumer behavior and key trends during COVID-19. And with that, I would like to welcome Mr. Ted Sullivan. He's the Vice President of Destination Analytics at Adara Inc. Ted, are you with us?
I am here. I am here.
All right.
Ready. Thank you all for having me. I honestly wish I was somewhere in APAC in Singapore or Tokyo or somewhere else other than my flat in London right now. But it is what it is. At least I put on a suit today, and my wife was really excited about that. So there was a positive there. So we're good. I'm going to share a lot with you all today. I'm going to move on here. Okay. Paul, I take it you can see my screen now?
Nope, not yet.
There we go.
There you go, yep.
All right. Everyone, I'm going to focus on what the APAC traveler is going to do next. Not just now, not just what's been happening over the past few months. We know that we've seen a lot of this, a lot of charts. Let's see. Seen a lot of that lately, and I'm not going to focus on that. What I'm going to focus on is we're all getting inundated with data and reports and graphs, and what do we do with that? And how do we move forward? The questions I get every single day are, when do I go back into market? Where do I go to market? And what do I use? What creative executions? What messaging do I use? So I'm going to sort of show you a lot of data and say, here's what I would do, and here's how to look at this a little differently moving forward. And I've been in the industry 25 years. I'm an optimist. I was in New York right after 9/11. I was in New Orleans for a month after Hurricane Katrina. And I've seen our industry get tougher. And I see an opportunity here. And I think it's actually going to be better. The knock on our industry, the criticism we always had, was that we are not one of the 4 elements that humans need: food, water, shelter, and air. I think that's changed now with the whole world being quarantined. And I do think travel is a human need. And to make my point, I'm going to show you something. And I think everyone will agree with me. See, doesn't that just draw emotions? That just looks so good right now. We will be needed again this way. That just looks fantastic. But we have an opportunity that also means when things get freed up, we do need to measure it. There's going to be a lot of pressure on the tourism industry because they need us now. The world needs us to get the economy going, but we need to measure it and improve it and then show our value even more than we have in the past. And we need to get better. I think everyone agrees. We need to get better at how we measure what we do. Right now, we are so relevant and we know it. Let's take advantage of that. So the data that I am showing today, I work at Adara, and at Adara, we have the data from almost 300 travel brands daily. The actual transactions, everything within these for the hotels, for the airports, for the airlines, meta search, OTAs, that type of data. And it's a lot. We can see close to 1 billion travelers a month, all right? Just to give you some context, that's the data we're looking at. And within this transactional data, there's more than you think. We know where they're coming from, where they're going. We see where else they search. We have the ADR, if it's business or leisure. So there's quite a bit of detail that we're going to be able to look at to see what our travelers are doing and how they're changing. Now, I'm going to get into the data now. So we're going to start looking at some techie stuff. I was going to give a keynote at ITB, and obviously we know that ITB was canceled. So I pulled this data, and I was going to present this just a few months ago. And I thought I'd share it anyway, because I think it's fascinating how things have kind of changed. This is 6 months of global data that we looked at, and I was going to present at ITB. I'm going to show it to you now, and just a few little markets I wanted to take a look at. The first one we looked at was 6 months of bookings into China and bookings out of China. And what we found was fascinating. We found that the Chinese, we'd see that they would be exposed to media in China, but a lot of them, a big percentage, more so than any other country, would actually book when they arrived in destination. You can speculate all you want. Maybe they're trying not to be seen by servers or whatnot, but we see that they were exposed to media, did that, flew out of China, but then booked their hotel when they got into market. Thought that was an interesting tidbit. Package tours and accommodations and the length of stay are on the rise. I'll be curious to see when they free up, but that will even increase. Once people are able to get out, are they going to stay out longer? I think those will be things to watch. Took a look at India. India, they have the longest length of stay flights into Europe, North America, and APAC, meaning it's about 35 days. When they land to when they leave, it is 35 days. However, they are rarely within the top 25 origin cities for hotel stays. So when they get there, staying with family and friends or shared accommodation, not big on staying in hotels. They also travel for social status more than experience and travel to relax more than a good time. So when you're thinking about marketing, what kind of creative executions would work in India? These things may change after the lockdowns end. Took a look at North America, and me being an American, I thought this was great. North America and the Americans will travel to more second cities more in 2020, right? They've done a lot of the major cities. I think you're going to see an increase in that even more so. So second tiered cities, getting out longer, they're going to be staying longer. Americans missed their spring break and their Easter holidays, so they're going to be staying longer. But this is something I think is going to change. Before this happened, Americans were going to take it slow-mo. They were going to take it a little bit more easy, not travel for adventure. Now they've been quarantined for a while, I think that will change. I think they will be more for an adventure and more of an experience. They take the longest time to book and arrive, but it's decreasing. And lastly, I wanted to take a look at the Middle East. And the Middle East are the most efficient travelers, the shortest time to book, to plan, and the shortest length of stay. But they're starting to use OTAs more, right? And using regional OTAs more. So the Middle East are growing, but they are very efficient. So it's a different window of marketing to the Middle East. Now I took a look at APAC. I'm going to show you, this is a dashboard. It's going to be a PDF report that we're going to provide weekly to PATA and send it and PATA's up to send it to their members or whoever they choose to send it to. This is some really good data. It can get a little nerdy. There's some technical stuff in there. I'm going to teach you what to look for, all right? So the first thing, this is a heat map, and this is a heat map of travel into APAC. It's weekly, and what it is year over year bookings, hotel and flight into APAC. So take a look on the left. What you're looking for is green. So you're wanting to see your markets turn green. That means that you're seeing an increase in search and booking behavior into APAC. So if you're looking at Turkey as a major market for you, Turkey's on the rise. They're starting to book more. So looking at Finland and whatnot. So green is good, red is bad. Just keep it that simple. If you're looking at markets and wondering what market to open up to, and you need that validation when you go to your board or some of your stakeholders, this is a good way to show what markets are opening up. Yes, these are some charts. Now this is APAC in general. What I did, if you look on the left, I separated the flight and the hotel. The blue line is 2019 and the red line is 2020. What's encouraging is that the bookings, yes, they're down, but they're leveling off and they're flattening. When you see this weekly, take a look at that red line and you will see every week, I think we're on week 17, you start looking at week 18, week 19, week 20, you start seeing an uptick into APAC. That's a good sign. That's when you start really looking at marketing in some markets of people going into APAC. All right, so when you see this weekly report, take a look at that. This is a 20-week forecast. We can see the bookings for about 5 or 6 months out, so searching and bookings. I think that's important to look at. So this, if we look at the very bottom, we've seen bookings into APAC increasing all the way into August. So every week this is going to keep going out, and we start, I think Forward Keys gave some great data showing that people are, increasing their intent and booking. Combine that with this, and you can really see going off into the fall when they're looking to come into the APAC region. I took a look at Japan specifically. I like, you know what, let's drill down. Let's look at a country specifically. And when you see the difference between searches and bookings, it's very important. This is search intent into Japan. Searches, all right? United States, #1 for searches. Japan, #2. Obviously, intra-Japan, of course, they're going to be doing that. The UK, Germany. But then when you look at bookings, it's completely different. So the US was searching, they weren't booking as much. So you're going to see a difference between searches and bookings. Take a look at both. Search is intent, but then you're also going to see bookings, and that's the actual transactions. Compare those differences. This is Japan, less volatile than APAC, actually quite smooth. And I think you're going to start seeing an uptick in Japan. And then I wanted to take it just a little bit further and show the airport. This is the Tokyo airport. These are flight bookings in the Tokyo airport that we can see within our ecosystem. And look how that's leveling off. There's a bunch of major spikes from last year in terms of bookings into Japan Airport, but I wanted to show you how granular you can get into certain cities and regions with both hotel and flight. And I want to just finish up with 4 quick reasons why I'm optimistic in this whole thing that we're dealing with. Being nimble has its advantages. Yes, we're seeing a lot of just changes within our industry, but sometimes that helps. There was a DMO in the States that cut staff into 60%, and I met with their director, and he's like, honestly, probably could have cut that a while ago, and it's helping us out. There's some certain things we can do a little bit better, and I think we all know that. I do believe pressure is a privilege. There's going to be more pressure on us as a tourism industry. Let's embrace it and get better with it and show our worth even better in the rest of 20 and 21 and beyond. And people are all saying, do we go after market share? Yeah, I would. And I'm an American, and North America is not going to open up for a while. And I would go after market share. I think that's a healthy thing to do. We are a business after all, and definitely go after market share. And remember what I showed you with the airport, the human need. It's going to be bigger than we've ever seen before. That human need to get out there and travel will be big. Let's take advantage of it. Thank you all for having me. I'm Ted, and look forward to answering any questions I can.
Sorry, I've got my my mic. Thank you very much, Ted, for that insightful presentation. As Ted said, Adara, we'll be working with Adara, and we'll be sending us some insights that we will be sharing with our members. So I'll give you a link to subscribe to our newsletter. So then you can be able to get those insights from Adara, and now you know how to read them. So I wanted to just find out about the poll results. So can one of my colleagues show us the results from the poll? Wow, so it's 56% said yes, 44% said no. So it's close, but I guess that's sort of the sentiments. It answers someone's question before, will people be willing to travel? Well, that's your answer right there. You will you can see what people are thinking, and sort of kind of use that as a barometer when you start planning your strategies going forward. So Ted, just stay with us because we're going to go into our next session, which is our insights panel. So I'd like to welcome back Pamela Olivier to join you, and also Dr. Mario as the moderator for this session. So Mario, you guys are all here, mics are on. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you guys can have your discussions. Over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Yep, can you hear me?
Yeah, all good.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So I can see lots of questions, and certainly, Pamela, I've got tons and tons of questions for you. So I'm going to start with some that actually came directly from our audience, and I see more and more questions are actually being added, so feel free to add your questions to this panel discussions. So first question is for Pamela. Is this coronavirus crisis a potential for geopolitical reset?
If we're talking about, say, the US-China relationship, I think COVID-19 has done nothing to bridge that tension. In fact, done quite the opposite. I think the countries have taken different approaches to handling the crisis, and sometimes have had then leveraged criticism on the other when the approach was not the same. The underlying tension between US and China is certainly not going away. And in fact, with this, we see a risk that, for example, the trade truce that was earned at the end of last year could potentially fall through, either because of the technical aspects of the trade pact. For example, the US no longer able to produce the agricultural products that China is meant to purchase under the agreement, as well as China not having the capacity to buy those goods because they've been killed by the coronavirus. And on the second sort of element, which is the most strategic one, I think we've seen, as I shared, that tech is really a powerful supporter player in helping us tide through the crisis, either by allowing us to continue working and living, as well as leveraging on tech tools to help us combat the spread of the virus. which again highlights the crucial role of tech in the new world that we're going to be embarking on. And that is really the nib of the bud around the tensions between the US and China, because they are keen on dominating tech supply chains in order to make sure that they can help support their businesses to new growth levels. So no, it's not going to help bridge geopolitical tension.
Thank you. Actually, another question, which actually is from me, but actually follows this same line of responses, is we've seen a lot of comments in the media about, you know, countries being more nationalistic. You mentioned it a little bit also in your presentation before, but also I've seen the opposite, where people are saying, yes, that is the current status, but is there a need for us to go back to actually more globalism, more collaborations and more cooperations if we really want to get out of this particular situation? Which one of the two you think will be the winner?
So unfortunately, I know I would love to bring in a lot more optimistic insights as Ted has. I love to bring in really a bit more brighter remarks. But our view and my personal view as well is that at the moment, global leaders are not in a position where they are collaborating with each other. They are quite focused on their own narrative in their own countries. And while at some level, some of them do want that collaboration, I can think of French President Macron, who has been very much a supporter of this sort of theories and trying very hard to gain that support through Europe, but it is not gaining traction to enough degree that we can say, oh, we are ready to embark on global collaboration. I'm very sure it's happening in certain areas. For example, Bill Gates and Melinda are really leading a global effort to try to help scientists find the cure to this pandemic. Is an example of kind of global collaboration, I think. But in terms of a national level, I think it's unlikely. What you are probably going to see is an extension of that nationalist sentiment, but perhaps moving into bilateral and sort of multilateral agreements where countries who are embarking on a growth recovery process at the similar stage of recovery are likely to partner with other countries in the same stage. In Singapore, we talk about the concept of green lanes among policymakers in the idea that, let's say Singapore does start to recover, are they looking for countries that are on a similar stage that they can partner with to commit to opening up trade, supply chains, movement of people, and they commit to keeping each other informed on the level of cases, transparency in data, so that if anything does crop up as they open up the economies, they can trust that their partners are able to feed them the right information that would then lead to the next course of action that can help prevent spiraling upwards of cases again, because that's a serious worry for the travel industry and for governments everywhere, that if we start to live borders together, we might face a risk of more cases coming up and we wouldn't be able to keep track of them.
Good, thank you. One last question really quickly before I move on to some of our other guests for today. Do you believe that actually we will see any economies, any countries within the region here in Asia Pacific, or even actually anywhere around the world, economies completely collapsing?
We are worried about Indonesia, for example. We look at it from an issue of sovereign debt, I guess, risk. The oil prices, which I didn't touch on, have obviously been at the lowest levels for historically, and that has put a real pressure on commodity producing countries such as Indonesia in the region and Malaysia as well. I wouldn't say that we're at a stage where we're predicting a crisis for them, but I think countries that rely on commodities as a large way to boost fiscal spending, as well as to support their economies through jobs, as well as balance of payments, they will really be under pressure at this point when commodity prices are coming down.
Thank you, Pamela. I might come back to you later, but for now, I'm going to move on to questions to Olivier. Olivier, you mentioned actually the air capacity going down enormously over the last couple of months, and most importantly also that over the next few weeks and months to go, it will continue to actually drop before it starts all over again. So do you believe that we'll end up with destinations being actually underserved in terms of air capacity? Again, the question is for Olivier Ponty.
Yes, thank you, Mario. Look, it's true that on the capacity front, there's been some major changes in the past weeks, with all key airlines cutting back on the number of routes that they serve, on the number of planes that fly, on the frequency of those planes. It's very difficult to know at this stage when capacity will pick up. I think airlines are in a very tough situation at the moment. They're in survival mode, so they will, reopen routes when they believe that they can make money out of them. So this will very much depend on a number of factors, like how well COVID-19 is under control, and people's willingness to travel as well. So we have information about scheduled flights up to 12 months in the future. But at the moment, it's not really telling us anything, because airlines do not know where they want to put capacity back on the market and when exactly. It's likely, once more, that it is going to be on the main routes that are the most profitable. What we're seeing as well worldwide is a number of airlines seeking for help, and that very much connects to what Pamela said earlier, with the states getting bigger and being more involved within the economy. We're seeing a number of airlines being nationalized or seeking help from the public authorities. Some countries will decide to play the game and support airlines, some others will not. So once more, I think we'll have a landscape that is going to be very different than what it was just a few weeks ago.
So in other words, Olivier, you're actually saying that we could potentially end up in a situation where some destinations have no service at all.
Or very reduced service, yes. But look, to put some optimism in this discussion, yes, at the moment, whether we're looking at capacity figures or at bookings or whatever, the figures are all very negative and all tell us the same story, which is a nightmare story. But the fact that we do have access to these data is in itself a very good piece of news, because that means that from the moment things start moving, we'll be able to spot when there is a recovery, where, which markets, what people are looking for. So we'll be able to be much more efficient in the way we approach this market, and hopefully we'll be able to quick start recovery. If you think of SARS or other previous crises the sector has gone through, it's not that long ago, but from a technological point of view, it's a long time ago. We didn't have this information at our fingertip. So I suppose one of the key lessons of the current crisis we're going through is that we now have the means to be smarter, to be much more efficient in the way we use our marketing budget. So it's time to be smarter. It's time for the industry, the travel sector, to show that it is smart, that it is innovative, that it can make the most of those technological tools and opportunities that we have at our disposal.
Thank you, Olivier. On a more optimistic note, as you mentioned earlier in one of your charts, which was quite encouraging, in saying that actually, when we look at the past trends in terms of summer bookings, there is still a potential, there is still a chance that actually we can actually save at least part of the summer. But what the question I have is, do you think because of the current situations we've been going through, that the habits of people's booking in the future will change, meaning that people will have a tendency to probably plan their trips at a much later stage, at the very last minute, mainly because of the uncertainty around the restrictions and et cetera? Will this become something more permanent, where people will book at much later in their planning?
I think people will need to adapt to the new normal. and it's still to be defined what this new normal is going to be. You know, from the moment people start flying again, how will it look like? You know, going to the airport, checking in, and getting on a plane. Will you get tested before you get on the plane? What kind of information will you have to provide before you get on the plane? How long will you have to stay in the airport before you can fly? All those things are complete unknown at the moment. We're seeing airlines taking some measures, the private sector trying to find a way to get people back on the planes. Investing in new technologies, putting new processes in place, etc. But we also have to take into account what public authorities are going to do. You know, what kind of rules will they put in place? And one of the key questions at the moment, and this is something happening behind the scene, I would say, is how efficient the travel sector will be in influencing the regulations that will be put in place, so that they also take into account the interest of the sector and not only the interest of other groups.
Thank you, Olivier. I'm going to move on to Ted with a couple of questions, and then I'll come back to each one of you with a very, very brief one. Ted, you've mentioned in your deck and your presentations about North Americans most likely being more interested in traveling to secondary destinations, to secondary cities. Is this actually a trend that you're currently seeing also in other parts of the world, or only in actually North America at the moment?
Not as, we're seeing a little bit in Europe too, but the biggest one is definitely North America. Just seeing that the Americans, they've looking into Europe and APAC, they've done the big cities. Now you're starting to see an increase in search and booking intent into those second cities. And so more there, but yes, we are seeing elsewhere, just not to the extent of North America. Exponentially, it's probably 3 or 4 times as much.
Okay. Well, actually, for some destination, I think it will be music to their ears, because certainly for PATA, this is something we've been promoting for years already, encouraging people to avoid crowded places and go into secondary destinations or smaller places.
And here's something else we're seeing, Mario. We're seeing an increase of length of stay from flights and hotels from North America and Europe into APAC, which is also good news. So that backed up vacations that they didn't take for Easter and spring, they're like, well, instead of taking a week, I'm going to take 2. So we're seeing a big increase, and the number of people on the itinerary is going from like 2.3 people to 4. So you thought they might be wanting to get away from their families after being cooped up with them. They're going to travel with them. So we're starting to see more of that. And I think that's very encouraging that they're going to go out for different experiences.
Yeah, over about a month ago, PATA also ran a survey in China specifically, asking the travel intents from Chinese to travel overseas and internationally. And we saw a fantastic response from them, saying that, you know, as soon as this is over, as soon as restrictions are lifted, they want to get on the plane, they want to go overseas, they want to go and travel again. So we're going to see a huge increase in travel from China when restrictions are actually starting to be lifted
Right.
in the future. Maybe one last question very briefly from you is about travel habits and choice of destinations. Do you think people will actually moving forward, or do you see any trends where people might actually shift their travel to different places than they had probably thought originally?
You know, I'm seeing a little bit of both. I'm seeing people going back to their old standbys where they feel safe and they go there and they went there from their families. But then I'm seeing people switch it up a little bit. Working with the Caribbean, obviously the North America is their biggest market. Well, Bermuda is going after market share because they're closer and technically they're rated safer. So they're like, hey, I'm going to go after that. So you will see a shift of maybe people that used to went to the Dominican Republic or whatnot to possibly go to Bermuda. So I'm seeing a little bit of both. It just depends. So some people are going back to their old standbys, and then some people are getting, hey, let's go here, and maybe not New York. You just never know.
Thank you. I see there's a lot of questions coming from the audience. We do have a very large audience today. And Paul will inform you later. We'll send some of these questions to the presenters and we'll respond them afterwards offline. But just before I close, because we're about to the end of our session, brief questions to each one of you, and we'll start with you, Ted, since you're on my screen. When this is all over, where do you and your family want to travel to?
Yeah, my wife and I bring that up because we're Americans and we live in London, and we're like, do we want to go back home right now? do I even want to go back to North America? I think we're going to probably take the train over to Europe and stay in a farmhouse somewhere in Belgium or France and just hang out for a little bit and be local and just chill. I think that's what we're going to do, and maybe not go back to North America for a while, being dead honest.
All right. Thank you, Ted, very much for joining us today. Thanks.
Thanks.
Olivier, where do you and your family plan to go?
For me, it's a no-brainer. I'll go back to France. I live in Spain. I'm a Frenchman living in Spain. I've been confined for 7 weeks, and I really, really would like to see my parents and hug them. So that's definitely going to be my first destination.
Now, we might cross paths then, because we plan to go to Spain while you're going to France. So,
all right.
Thank you. And finally, Pamela, where do you and your family plan to go on holiday?
So we had to cancel our trip to Tasmania in April when it's my brother's birthday, and we were meant to celebrate my daughter's birthday at Cradle Mountain and hiking there. So I'm very much hoping that when we can travel again, we can rebook all of that beautiful scenery resorts that we can kind of ease our minds and just peer into nature and wilderness.
All right, thank you very much to all three of you. And before I hand over to Paul, I'd like to say again, big thank you to all three of you. And I do hope and wish that actually your next trip after your initial one will be to Thailand. So we'd love to see you here. Thank you very much. Back to you, Paul.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you, Ted, Pamela, Olivier. So Ted, Pam, Olivier, if you have a chance, there are some questions that are directed to you. In the Q&A, you guys can easily just go in there and type in your answers directly to some of the people while we go to the next panel. Feel free to go ahead and answer those questions directly. Thank you again very much, and hopefully we will be able to see you soon, whether it's in Thailand or in Spain, France, the UK, or some farmhouse somewhere in the UK. Thank you very much, Ted, Olivier, and Pam. Okay, so I want to get to, we have another poll question, kind of also in line with Marge just asked. What will your next family holiday be in? Will it be in the city or will it be in nature? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of nice follow-up from what Mara just asked. So let's do a quick poll here, and Rashi can show it, just give it a minute or two. And while you guys start here answering the questions, we have our next panel discussion, moving beyond crisis management and strategies for recovery. And with us today, we have Joe Naiman, a partner at 2031, as well as Elliot Mershon. Some of you guys might know him as Al, but he recently rebranded. That's what he told me. He's a partner at MGY Global. Before we get into the panel discussion, can we see the results from the poll? My colleagues back over there. Nature. Everyone wants to go to nature. So that's a pretty overwhelming. Well, I guess being stuck in the cities has had its toll on everybody. So with that, let's jump into our panel discussion here. Ted, you can turn off your camera. You're still I can still see you there. Okay. Sorry. Let me just. So you guys just give a brief introduction for yourselves. Joe, you first. Just give a 1 or 2 minute introduction to all our guests here today.
Sure, thank you, and thank you to Pata for hosting this. It's been informative for me, and we've been coming across a lot of information so far. So thank you very much. My name is Joe Naiman, live from the epicenter, I guess, at New York City. I work for a company called 2031. Some of you probably are familiar with us. We work with primarily destinations around the world in supporting them identify their competitive advantages and how to leverage strategies in order to take advantage of those and reach the visitors that they typically want to reach.
Thanks, Al.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for the opportunity, and hello to everyone. I'm a partner at MMGY Global. We are the largest integrated marketing company that specializes 100% in the travel industry, with offices throughout the United States, London, Europe, and the Middle East. And we're also part of Travel Council, a large integrated consortia of travel marketing companies in 18 countries representing 55 different nations. So thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Well, thank both of you. I know it's fairly late. You guys are both based in the U.S., so really appreciate. Thank you so much for being here. So let's do a quick lightning round, and then we're going to go to the questions from our audience. So this is a question for both of you. What are we seeing at 35,000 foot level for tourism globally, and because you guys are both in the U.S., in North America?
I'll jump in. Once again, thanks. I mean, the U.S. is pretty diverse across the country, so we see different pockets reacting very differently. Obviously, where Joe has said, it's in the epicenter, and he can address some of those concerns there. I'm based in California, which is still the 5th largest economy in the world. We seem to be managing it a little better. I think we've probably learned some lessons from New York, and probably a different attitude there. We're trying not to use the word recovery, because recovery denotes going back to a way things were and not moving forward. The simplest study of Charles Darwin says it wasn't survival of the fittest, it was those who adjust to change who are the ones who survive and prosper. When it comes to the economy, there's the V-shaped theory, which I think few people agree with. The U is a little more realistic. If you're a pessimist, it's an L. We tend to think it might be a capital W, where it's gone down, might start to come back up, waver a little bit, and then come back. We do think out of the travel and tourism business, travel will come back first. There needs to be that comfort level with the person traveling before tourism falls into place. And I think they're going to have to visualize or see some visual clues that says it's okay, the way we needed to see metal detectors before we got on planes after 9/11, the way we saw infrared cameras in Asia after SARS. So we'll need to see more masks, we'll need to see seals and things like that. Tourism will come back probably first with domestic travel, then family. Internationally, probably the wealthy high-end visitor will come back first, and a lot of family, we think. The business traveler, we think, will come back the latest. Because of events like this being online. And that wasn't something we could have addressed beforehand because the technology wasn't there. It is now, and so we'll rely on that more than we ever have before. And the other part of the US is for business people to travel domestically or internationally, there's more liability concerns from the company. And so that'll influence that as well as the cost of travel in a slow economy.
Joe?
Yeah, so just to add to that, I think the first thing at the 35,000 foot level is you can sort of take the strategies that you've had in 2019, crumple them up, and literally throw them in the trash. It's going to be a completely different world. I think, everyone's talking about the new normal. We call it the next normal, and we don't really know what it looks like yet. But what we do know is that there are a couple of glimmers of hope, I would say, that we're starting to see come up around the world, and it's interesting to follow those. To be honest, it's a little bit refreshing, especially from where I sit, to see certain destinations that have plateaued in terms of number of cases or completely removed the cases. So there are glimmers of hope. We're tracking those as well. And I will say as well, we talk about when travel returns or when we can start to re-engage with tourism again. I just wanted to sort of, again, at that 35,000 foot level, just make sure that everyone is aware that it's not like, there's going to be a D-Day for when that happens. There's not going to be, some moment in time where we say, oh, travel is back and we can go and have a parade and travel again. We might not, have specific clues that say COVID is over. It's going to be a gradual shift. And there are certain methods that we're using, and I'm happy to get into them in more detail, to talk about what that gradual shift will look like. And so basically what we're saying, for every destination, there are specific phases. And there are specific things that mainly destinations, but it can actually apply to all types of organizations as well. So hotels, food and beverage, et cetera. how do you plan for what that next normal looks like, what that uncertainty, we're hearing that word a lot, looks like, without obviously knowing what that is. So just to add a little bit more to that, thought of opportunity and enthusiasm that we were talking about a little bit before.
But then what kind of like strategic frameworks would you see like destinations or organizations use to address the current situation? I guess this would probably answer some of the questions that we have here, like quickest policies, quick solutions to sort of help jumpstart this.
Yeah, I'll take that as well. So, I mean, those are really good questions. To be honest, I think everyone here has been on many different webinars, and some are better than others. And so far this one has been great, and hopefully, some of the advice that we're giving here will be helpful to people listening in as well. A lot of what we've heard has been at the high level. We need to do research, we need to plan, we need to do some scenario planning, but what does that actually mean? So I would actually like to share a specific framework, maybe a couple of frameworks that various tourism organizations and destinations can use. I'm going to try to keep this relatively short as well, because I know there are a lot of questions. And the first framework is what we call the Destination Leadership Framework. And it's a fairly simple 6-step process. And the first step is to conduct a very good situational analysis of where you stand as an organization. And what that means is looking at various levers that impact you as a business. So that can be source markets, that could be channels, that could be products, experiences, infrastructure, your marketing, as well as the enabling environment. So, if you think about it that way, if this is step number 1, situation analysis, you're looking at the demand side. So looking at the visitors and the travelers and where they're coming from and understanding what the current situation is, and also pair that with what it was before. And you compare that also to the demand side, because a lot of times we talk about supply side, we want to get back into marketing, but what's the point if most of the restaurants that we have and that we want tourists to come and visit are closed, or that they need to be maintained? Or what about some of the other assets? So it's very important to do that first step. The second step from there is then to define some scenarios based on phases of recovery for your destination. So the first part of the conversation today that we've had is it's been we're talking more at a general level. Every destination is different, and every not to use that word, but to use it, recovery will be different. And so, how do you plan for that? And what we typically like to do is to create 3 different scenarios: a best case, a mid case, and a bad case scenario. And when you do that, you then define it, you structure it, and you put some actual thinking around that, which is step 3, which is the risk by scenario and by the drivers that we talked about as well. So assessing what all those risks are, and then step 4 would be to create action plans based on the prioritized risks, and mainly planning for the worst case scenario. Step 5 would then be to actually to implement. So it's a fairly simple framework that we've put in place that we're using with destinations that are actually helping them plan for what that next normal looks like without really knowing what that next normal is. So there's a little bit more to that. I'll probably get into in other questions, but I'll stop there and maybe give Al a chance to.
I'm sure people will send emails afterwards asking for more detailed. But let's jump over to Al. It's like a lot of destinations are doing a lot of creative things now. So what are some of the things that they're doing from a strategic perspective to address the current situation or prepare for the next normal? What do you see on your end?
Well, I think we see a lot of things. I think we see a lot of destinations staying in the marketplace, from the marketing and public relations and social media. I think it's important. I think the key is respecting the situation, but I think it's also creativity and working with their suppliers. There's so much the state can do, or the city, or the country, but it's also the creativity of the individual companies too. For example, in Texas, a movie theater, which were all closed, had a big one had a big parking lot. They painted the side of the wall white, took a projector outside, and showed movies for free so anybody could drive in, an old traditional drive-in in their parking lot. Now, they couldn't make money off of that, but through their app, they could sell food and people could deliver it curbside to their cars. So they were able to make money from that side. I was recently reading in Lithuania, they're looking at making their big plazas in some of their streets the largest outdoor cafe and setting up tables and chairs so they can have social distancing and allow the restaurants to still participate in that and the consumers to be a part of it too. We also see creativity with some of the tour operators out there, pushing credit rather than refund, but giving an incentive for that credit rather than refund. So for example, in some of the cruise lines are saying, if you just change it from this year to next year, we'll give you a credit for 125% of what you paid this year. One of the large tour operators said, come next year with us to the same destination, we'll give you a $500 travel wallet. And we're even seeing hotels and resorts saying, come back and your single room will be a suite. So there's all sorts of creativity that could be done in that way that will keep the person dedicated to that destination and come, if not now, when the time is right, and respecting that too.
Yeah, so travel later, right? So making sure that your company still has cash flow, but of course keeping that dream alive and inspired for the traveler. So then, what should destinations be focusing on now as we prepare for the new normal? I mean, what's some of the things that they should address right now? And some examples.
Sure. Well, I think part of it is staying in the marketplace. Right now, being there, telling stories, having smart campaigns, not hard sell stuff, but what's happening, what are the people doing? And all of that can be related to the safety of the destination, the healthiness, if you will, of the destination. Tangible examples of what the healthcare system in that country does, what the destination does, how the people are rallying around. Those are important things. The other part is to show where there's natural social distancing. Sometimes it's not the perfect time to show a busy city. It's more important to show outside of the city, and what we were talking about before about secondary and tertiary destinations. Now's the time to talk about your wide open spaces. Now's the time to talk about your little towns and those stories. And I think, and I think Ted alluded to it, the length of stay is probably the most important thing to think about as you're building the future, because that's going to make or break you more probably than anything else. If you don't have that many visitors, you better make sure that those visitors stay for a long time.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because it's actually not a one size fits all. So what should destinations do now? It depends. I mean, we're speaking to destinations, for example, in Canada, and that are mainly focused on winter and ski, and their entire towns are decimated. So their entire town has 80% plus unemployment, versus other destinations that we're speaking to, mainly island nations, who are saying, hey, we've contained COVID, we're good, and what do we do now? So I think what we do now is different, right? For the first example, you need to basically address the current situation, whereas for the next one, it's planning. What it comes down to, if you think about it, there will be a lot of destinations that are going to be competing for this scarce resource, which will be the visitor in whatever form it comes. And so, how do you prepare for when that trigger happens, when you need to execute? And that's sort of the questions that we're mainly asking destinations to try to figure out right now is, create your plan based on scenarios so that when the right time comes, you have a couple of options that you can implement right away, because there's going to be a lot of competition once we start to see the semblance of a return to travel.
All right, so we got like 10 minutes here. I think we got like 29 questions. Let's try to get through those here. So quick question, does China ban outbound travel at the moment? And when will travel restrictions be lifted and outbound travel from China will recover? Anybody know? I don't think, well, I can answer that. I don't think there's a ban, but there's just no flights going on, right? I mean, a lot of people have just, I know some destinations aren't allowing flights, so it's not so much about a ban of outbound travel, but there's no flights being received by, particularly in Thailand. We see airlines only accepting. They've only just started with domestic flights here in Thailand. I don't know when they would even allow international flights. I guess policies and rules would have to be in place first. So,
I will say some of those questions I did see a little bit. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say some of those questions, Paul, I saw a little bit earlier before they came on for other presentations as well. So maybe we start from the bottom up.
okay, yeah.
They're irrelevant for the session as well.
Think about the future job holds for tourism and hospitality. Will this create new job opportunities specializing in digital since hospitality relies on human? Good question.
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Al.
Oh, go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Certainly, there's definitely going to be, a shift that we're seeing. We're starting to see this as, across the conference and event space, across the accommodation space, towards more technology and how that technology gets used. What that looks like exactly is hard to tell right now. There are certain things that we're tracking in destinations that have that are starting to come back. So I would say track those, follow what they're doing, follow the industry associations and some of the suggestions and things that they're requesting as well from the next normal perspective. It will have an impact, but in general, what we've seen is technology does take some jobs, but it creates more jobs as well. So I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Al, anything to add or no?
That sums it up. I mean, the technology is certainly going to be a big need, and marketing too, because it's going to be so competitive out there at that same point. I think there'll never be a shortage for those types of jobs.
I'll jump up to the next one. It's from Jameson here, a good friend of Forkeys. Has there been any discussion yet cross-sector on approaching and managing the cost of traveler, considering the airlines and airports, the airlines are not having to invest heavily in hygiene infrastructure? Is the mass market LCC low fares model still viable? And at what point does the cost of acquiring a traveler for destinations go higher than tourism receipts spent by said traveler?
I think this goes back to what I mentioned before about the length of stay is going to be crucial. And I think it's beholden to the destinations to once again be creative and all the stakeholders to be creative. No longer can you be interested in just selling a hotel. You need to group together with some of the local tours. You need to group together with the restaurants, and you need to put long-term packages together that really spread out the experience for longer days. So there's more touch points, and the economic rebound will be quicker if everybody shares in that economic rebound. That's going to be the most beneficial to all the destinations. Those partnerships with those stakeholders will be important. The government will be important too on bringing the person in, but it'll be like that. I'm not sure that the price of the airline tickets will be as high as some people calculate, because that model will not be a long-term viable model. There'll be adjustments, and in the same sense, years ago, people complained about wearing seatbelts. They got used to it. They complained about taking their shoes off. They got used to it. If it's going to be masks and gloves, they'll get used to it, and the seats will be filled. And Ted's comment about the passion for travel will stay strong.
Yeah, just from my perspective, there will definitely be an impact on some businesses that are typically lower margin, because now instead of fitting 200 people on a flight or a cruise, they can only fit 50, and so some of those won't make any. The business model will not make any sense anymore. So that will change, but I think in every period of crisis, we've also seen new business models come up. Airbnb is the perfect example from 2008. It was actually born right after the Great Recession of 2008. So we will find new models coming up based on this new normal.
What do you see for the future of trade shows and conferences? What's the next or new norm for sort of business events?
This is it.
We're in it.
That actually brings you one thing. We have a poll here. This is the last poll. I just want to pop it up real quickly. Just if you can, would you join, this is for everyone, would you join a virtual trade show? I mean, that's interesting to know. I mean, are people willing to do that? I mean, I know most times it's about networking, but you know, is virtual that going to be that important going forward? I mean, can you still sort of network virtually? So
I think we're only limited by our creativity. And I think you see some of the activities. There's a company in the UK, Europe, Bench, who just put on a 7,000 person attended event with side chat rooms, main stages, and all sorts of other things like that. I think the opportunity for that type of creativity is strong. Will people eventually come back to the traditional things? Yes, but once again, it's going to be the responsibility of the company, because of the liability factors, especially out of the US, to really evaluate if that person needs to go to these things. And it's also going to take time to build up the budgets, because for this year, those budgets for those types of travel have been eliminated, and it'll be hard to fit that back into the budget to build it up again. So it'll be a hybrid for a little bit of time, but we will get back to a little bit of what we knew and a little bit of something that we don't know yet.
Right. So it's a question here. I'll jump up quickly to the SMEs. Really, what strategies can destinations consider so that more SMEs can survive when tourism returns? SMEs right now being devastated across the region. So what can they do to get past this?
I'll jump in. Sorry, Jeff. First, domestic. I think that's going to be the initial key for survival and then to prosper. And I mentioned before, this is a time to talk to your neighbor, maybe digitally at first, but it's a time to be creative and say, what kind of packages can we put together for a domestic audience first to really showcase everything, and then broaden that out for international. What used to be competitive is now cooperative, and it needs to have that spirit and that creativity to put something together that no one else can offer, thinking about all the health guidelines and everything else that's out there. And I'm sure there's plenty of examples, if we had more time, to talk about how hotels and tours and companies and everything else have worked together to come up with innovative packages for the consumer.
Yeah, I agree. A couple of things that we've seen. So destinations, they do need to play a leadership role in terms of, when we use the word DMO, that M's could be marketing, could be management. I think we really need to focus on that management piece of it right now, and that means playing a leadership role, providing information, and that could be in the form of guidance, it could be in the form of training. SMEs are being decimated right now. One of the other things that we've seen some destinations do is take stock of what are the SMEs that are still there, what are the SMEs that are hurting right now, and making sure that they're providing the resources to them to support them in order to prepare for whatever that next normal is. That's another thing to think about. And then the final thing that we've seen as well, I'm sure there are many more, is we're starting to see, I think Pamela mentioned these green lanes. So similarly, as tourism destinations begin to open, there will be opportunities for destinations to support this sort of, we call it like a bubble mentality, bubble thinking, whether it's within their destination or also with neighboring destinations as well. So, just a couple of ideas of how to support SMEs within destinations.
I mean, just a follow-up question to that. I know I've heard it many times, right now, it'll be domestic will be the first phase. But what about destinations that don't have domestic? I mean, Singapore, I mean, what about Maldives? I mean, look at the Pacific nations. Everyone's telling, oh, domestic, but there's no domestic in a lot of destinations in this region, right? So what are they supposed to do? What's your answer to them?
I'll have that one, yeah. No, the first answer, just to be direct and honest, is it's not going to be easy. And again, mainly because we are seeing, there's going to be a gradual shift towards, the full tourism that we knew back in 2019. So, we're going from no tourism basically to a little bit of travel within a destination, basically, removing restrictions from non-essential businesses and parks and things like that, to eventually, maybe that bubble, grouping that I was talking about before, where it's, these safe harbors that people can travel to, and that is organized by policymakers, and then to longer international, longer haul travel after that. So, I think that is going to, that's going to be mainly the phases that destinations are going to go through in order to get to, where we were. And even then it will look a little bit different. So it's not easy. The only additional thing, Alan, sorry, I know you probably have something to add to that as well, that I would like to add is there are certainly opportunities right now, even for the domestic market. We talked a lot about, these vacations that have been missed, and people are eager to travel again. I really liked Olivier's, the first place he wants to go back is home to visit his parents. And I think a lot of people are thinking that as well. And you can turn that into, a local, longer domestic holiday. So, even though you're still in your same country or perhaps in your same region, we're going to see people taking that longer 1 week versus a long weekend holiday to various places. So it's not all done for local for destinations that are smaller, like Singapore and the Maldives.
Al?
It's a great question, Paul. I mean, I think it is tough if you can't do the domestic, and you do have to start at least on a regional basis, because people will fly shorter before they fly long. The ones who are flying long are, once again, the ones you want to keep for the longest period of time. What we do caution people is try not to discount, try to add value. Because the one thing we've seen historically in a Vegas or where all of a sudden a 5-star place is $99, to get that price back up to the $400, $500 a night takes a long, long time. On the other hand, if you keep that rate at $400, but you give 6 days for the price of 3, if you once again partner with the stakeholders in the area and say, for these 4 nights at our regular price, you will also get this tour, you will also get these restaurant opportunities, you will also get these things. So the value is exponential. You're sharing it with everybody in the destination, and you're keeping the length of stay on a limited amount of visitors who arrive. So it solves a lot of problems while keeping that rate at a respectable rate. And it also keeps the value proposition there, so it doesn't seem like that property or that product has decreased in its quality. And that's a better long-term approach for everybody.
Yep, couldn't agree more.
Well, I think we just ran out of time here, so thank you very much, Joe and Alan. Any last thoughts? Any last words of advice for our participants today? Al?
I'm just damn glad we don't have to hear the word over tourism for at least the next 5 years.
Yeah, and just very quickly on my end, I know these are trying times for a lot of people. Keep persevering. I do believe that the light at the end of the tunnel is even brighter than what we imagined and what it was before. So stay strong.
And I'll quickly quote an American president that said, if you want to predict the future, create it for yourself.
Great words to end it with. Thank you very much, Al. Thank you very much, Joe. I know it's very late for you guys, so or really early in the morning for you, Joe. So get some rest. Thank you so much, and a big round of applause for you guys.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Take care. All right.
Thank you.
Now we get to the end of this, so I would like to invite Mario back here. I think you actually wanted to answer a question from one of our participants. So Mario, do you want to go answer this question first before you close out today's webinar?
Sure. Actually, it's a question from a dear friend, Mandip Singh Soy from India, who asked a question. Mario, do you think there will be an overall move towards traveling responsibly? Maybe lighter footprints, carbon issues, less mass tourism, both at an industry and a traveler level? Or is this the human being going to get back to the business as usual? I'm certainly optimistic and hopeful that actually people will be more conscious, more sustainable, more responsible in their future travel. And certainly from the responses we've seen earlier today, do people want to go to actually city travel, or do they want to go to nature after this? Well, I got a great answer for you, Mandip. Great business coming your way soon, because you're focusing mainly on nature travel. And this is exactly what 83% of the respondents on this call actually said they want. I certainly want to go back to nature. I suspect many of us actually do want the same thing too, as it was highlighted before. And we're certainly going to think about doing it more responsibly, I hope, moving forward. Will it be sustainable longer? Meaning, will people continue after this crisis, way after it's over, way after there's a vaccine, where people will continue to focus on being more responsive and sustainable? I pray for it, and I certainly hope for it. And I think if we stand together, if we actually work together to ensure that our businesses are also promoting sustainable and responsible travel, then we have a fair chance of actually achieving this moving forward. So I hope it answers this questions, Mandip, and thank you again for asking this question. Very relevant, very appropriate in this instances. I'd like to actually, just say a few words to close. First of all, thank you for the many hundreds of you who actually registered for this event, the thousands of you who registered for this event, who actually joined us today, for taking time out of your busy calendar to listen to some insights from our experts, to join us for this afternoon. And let's stay home, let's stay safe, and pray that we travel all soon together again. So thank you very much. Back to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Mario. Sorry, people keep telling me I need to speak up, so I need to find my headset. The kids must have took it and ran away with it. But I just want to quickly show the poll results. Can we get those up? The last poll we had, would you be interested in attending? Yes, so 70%. So I guess there is a new normal now. People are willing to adapt and change to the current environment. Just to quickly go through a couple things here as we wrap up. Please complete the survey here about today's webinar. You can click, there's the quick the link, or you can scan the QR code. So please answer the survey questions. It will help us to develop further webinars in the future and improve your experience. Next, the presentations and webinar recording will be made available next week. We will send an email out to all the registered delegates, so please keep an eye out for that. Do give us some time, as we need to prepare all the documents and the video. Next, we have a couple more webinars. If you enjoyed this one, we have one next week on our membership benefits and the Crisis Resource Center and Tourism Recovery Monitor with my colleagues Rung and Graham, as well as myself. The week after that, we'll have a webinar on impact of COVID-19 on our recent released PATA Visitor Forecast 2020 to 2024. Please do join it. Here's the date and times, but if you want more information, stay updated with us and sign up for the PATA weekly newsletter. So as Ted said, we'll be working with Adara, and they'll be sending us some updates from them about their dashboards. So we'll be sending that as part of our newsletter distributions in the going forward. So please scan the code, click on the link, sign up. If you sign up today, you'll receive a link to download highlights from the PATA Quarter Tourism Monitor, fourth quarter 2019, as well as accompanying infographics. That's it. That's the end of today's webinar. Once again, thank you to TCEB for partnering with us to organize today's webinar. Thank you to our speakers from all over the world. I know for some of them it was very late. Thank you so much. And thank you for all of you for joining us today. I hope to see you at future webinars, but more importantly, I hope to see you face to face at future events. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day. Take care and stay safe.